Here are three numbers that are critical to the survival of humankind as we know it. 2 degrees Celsius, 875 gigatons, 0.4%. Why? The world is getting warmer every year. With current trends, we are heading towards 5 degrees Celsius global warming. This is very serious, deadly serious. It will mean the end of human life on this planet as we know it. It will mean a collapse of ecological systems. If our ecological systems collapse, civilization will collapse too. Yet very oddly and very alarmingly, the clear warnings from the world's leading scientists are not being heard. This short video will present the latest science, which shows how fast we are heading towards catastrophe. All the data has been confirmed by leading scientists from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. This video will also present the science solution. This problem is solvable. Since the industrial age, we have been releasing thousands of billions of tons, gigatons, of climate-changing emissions into the atmosphere at a rate and volume that will make human life on our planet profoundly difficult. These emissions have already guaranteed an average global temperature rise of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Scientists have warned that a rise above 2 degrees Celsius will have a devastating impact on humanity, a catastrophe. According to the world's best scientific knowledge, to avoid overstepping a rise of 2 degrees Celsius, we must limit our future global emissions to 875 gigatons of carbon dioxide from today. Although we have known for decades that the concentration of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere needs to be reduced, successive global conferences have not managed to reduce our emissions. The red line has been steadily moving up, gigaton by gigaton, year on year. In fact, since 1995, despite 20 different climate change conferences attended by the nations of the world, we have not managed to stabilize our emissions. To the contrary, there has been a relentless rise. If this pattern continues, we are en route to very serious consequences. IPCC scientists estimate that if global warming exceeds 2.9 degrees Celsius, an extraordinary 21% to 52% of the 8.7 million species of life will be committed to extinction. In concrete facts, 5 degrees Celsius warming would mean such things as a staggering over 10-meter rise in the sea level and the failure of the Amazon rainforest. An utter catastrophe, a total collapse. We stand at a junction in Paris in December at the 21st UN Climate Change Conference. Either we tip the line down towards a minimum level of safety, the green line, or we follow the pattern of the past and maintain our trajectory towards disaster. The most efficient, effective, and equitable way to push down our emissions is through a global agreement. The United Nations of the world must act. All 196 nations of the world share the same roof over their heads. We all share the same atmosphere. We don't want to talk about the small details of political policy here. We don't want to discuss local or individual efforts about emissions. Once a binding global agreement is in place, these details will fall into place. Science has given us climate change solutions for years. There are no technical or even economic barriers. However, the necessary policy changes are not easy. But governments have adapted to limits before, whether they were imposed by war or nature. If we don't take the science seriously now, the changes will be imposed on us by the climate anyway, and in a much more chaotic and violent way. We need a global agreement at the highest level of politics for the highest level of science. We need a global agreement for global emissions. Let's be clear. Look at the left-hand side of the screen. On September 27, 2013, in Stockholm, Sweden, world governments approved the IPCC's conclusion that to likely limit global warming to 2 degrees Celsius, we must keep our future emissions under this 875 gigatons from now. Through scientific advance, we have come to diagnose a fundamental problem, the 2 degrees Celsius warming, and science has also provided us with the solution, keeping emissions under 875 gigatons. Now look at the right-hand side of the screen. Politicians have not wanted to deal with the problem. They have not wanted to confront reality. This year, for example, several states have offered their proposals to keep us within this safe limit. Given the gravity of the situation, you would sincerely hope that they would be choosing the green line down to safety. The bad news is that when you add up all the promises made, it comes to a miserable 20% of what is required. This counter shows the number of gigatons we have left. It is rolling towards zero. This is a live number and it is not slowing down. At current rates of emissions, we will reach zero in 2035 and lock in a minimum rise of 2 degrees Celsius. Political leaders do not want this number out in public debate because it clearly shows how quickly we are heading towards 2 degrees Celsius. This number has been hidden by making all the declarations about emissions in a highly confusing and odd mix of percentages and dates. A 40% cut by 2030 compared with 1990. A 28% cut by 2025 compared with 2005, and so on. We are students, and if our report card said that our grade in history would move by 30% by 2025 compared with 2005, we would not accept it. It is so unclear. No one publishes their economic data in such a contorted manner, so why should we accept contortion in the most important issue of the 21st century? The calculations of this presentation, which gets to the truth behind these foggy declarations, have been verified by the top scientists at IPCC, the UN, UNEP, IEA. These clear calculations look ugly. It is not difficult to work out why politicians do not want to make them clear. So how hard do we have to push the brakes to stop at 2 degrees Celsius? Let's now put the countdown into the scissor graph. On the left is the red number that shows all the carbon tons that have already been emitted. On the right is the green number, which shows the limit we have remaining before 2 degrees Celsius is locked into the climate system. We are emitting a monumental 1 gigaton of carbon every 9 days. That is equal to the weight of 1 Eiffel Tower every 8 seconds. We are not heading down towards the green, we are heading up. We have not stabilized our emissions, we have continued to accelerate them. Minus 0.3765% shows the current action needed in order to attain that goal. Intended emissions are only 20% of what is required for 2 degrees Celsius. When you place into the graph the current commitments of all the nations of the world, the blue dotted line shows where we are currently heading. It is nowhere near enough. We are nowhere near bending our emissions towards 2 degrees Celsius. Humanity's emissions are increasing plus 0.2% each month. The intended agreement for Paris is to cut this to plus 0.1%, which is only 20% of what is required. The current agreement for Paris is only 1/5 of the minus 0.4% that is needed. If we had made more effort in the past, things could have been much easier. When we were born, only a 0.1% reduction was needed. When we were 10 years old, only 0.2% was needed. Now, almost 0.4% is needed. If Paris fails to agree to what is needed, it will be years before we have another chance to act, and the percentages will become unmanageable. Let's pull it all together with this main slide. Notice that since the first UNFCCC climate change conference in 1995, global emissions have climbed by an alarming 38%. There may be many more solar panels and wind farms out there, but energy policies have hardly moved, and population consumption trends have exerted a continually strong upwards push on emissions. These upward pressures have not been matched by a political will to deal with the situation. Unless there is major change of gear and a serious rise in democratic intention, we will not move on to the green path. Here is the same graph, simplified. We are not close to heading in the right direction. The consequences of not shifting course will be deeply serious. Climate change is not something that can be adapted to with extra suntan cream. There is no time here to read through the long menu of dangerous and negative consequences, but here is one example: immigration. The current migration crisis will look trivial compared to the mass movement of people that is predicted to occur due to climate change. Millions of people will lose their homes and livelihoods due to rising sea levels. Millions will lose their crops due to dramatic shifts in weather patterns. IPCC scientists forecast that at current emission rates, climate change could add up to more than 1 billion migrants. To conclude, if an asteroid were heading towards Earth, it would be a massive media event. Timescales, maps, graphs, clocks would be published. Live data would be available. We would want to know exactly what our world leaders were doing about it. They would be held to account at every step. No known asteroid is heading towards Earth, but there is a very real existential threat to human civilization. Carbon emissions are invisible, but their effects will be very dramatic. So these 3 numbers are all you need to know. 2 degrees Celsius is the temperature rise that we cannot afford to overstep. 875 are the remaining gigatons the global community has left before that temperature rise is likely assured. 0.4% reduction per month in emissions is the speed at which we need to act in order to keep within this limit, starting from today. These are the main conclusions of the highest level science. Our data and graphs have been drawn from and approved by the world's leading climatologists. Everyone has the right to know them. Everyone has the right to ask their leaders what they are doing about them. Change can happen if we demand it. We can be positive. We can be positive because we are all Homo sapiens, the wise species that can know what is true, right, and lasting. We are the most incredible creatures, capable of astonishing levels of understanding and change. You can be part of the good news. You can be part of the change. The arrows can bend down, but only if democracies demand it. Join us by posting an angry selfie of yourself with the solution, 0.4% now. Sign our petition. Demand a change. Go to point4percent.org.